I have to ask you about the floating forest. And you write about Santiago, once again, beautifully in the book, of the time when he told you the stories and when your mind and eyes were still fresh and maybe skeptical and more leaning towards the Western world point of view versus the jungle point of view. Santiago's eyes were glowing in the darkness. He watched the orange embers spark upward to join the celestial river of stars that arched across the night sky, as if the memories were written there. He squinted, his face as wrinkled and weathered as an old map of the world. Vast experience whispered in the firelight, as ephemeral as the breath that spoke the words, but powerful enough to latch on and sink down into some deep part of me. This is Pico saying, Papa, tell me about the anaconda on the Blackwater stream. And he tells the story of that. He talks about it big and having horns. And you write, once again, masterfully about you at that time having doubts. It sounds like bullshit. But now more and more of the things you've seen of the jungle and the things you sense you have not seen yet, all of those stories seem to be true. The one he was referring to may be 36 feet long, this big, he shows it. He says that the floating forest is the place you need to go, gringo, if you want to be liberated of your doubts and skepticism. So tell me about the anacondas you've encountered in the floating forest.
Well, the thing he's describing there is that he's saying they found an anaconda that had horns.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we were all hanging out by the side of the river, and I said, that's enough. I stood up. I was like, come on. I was like, there's no anaconda that has horns. And if I've learned anything in 20 years of living with the indigenous people in the Amazon, it's that they're not wrong. You know, if they say there's a tribe of naked people with arrows out there, they're right. They're right. And they know what an anaconda looks like. So if he says he saw an anaconda with horns, he saw something that ain't a normal anaconda. And a smaller version of this played out recently, where one of the people that works at the treehouse, he came and he said, I found a snake and it was in the water tank, and he goes, and it had green spikes on it. And I said, there's no snake that has green spikes. I said, congratulations, you're an idiot. You know, and I made fun of him. Yeah. And I said, I know all the snake species that are here. I said, none of them have spikes. There's no snake that has spikes coming off of it. And he said, no, it had long spikes. He said, the snake is this big and it had spikes this long on it. And I said, there's no snake with spikes. Until finally he came and he got me in the night. And he goes, the snake with spikes is there. And I said, well, I'll get out of bed for that. Let's go. And I said, and I guarantee it's not going to be there when we get there. And we got to the water tank and I shined my flashlight down, and sure as shit, there's a snake in there, and it's got thousands of green spikes coming off of it. And I could see the snake head, and the spikes are coming completely perpendicular out from its body. And for a second, I really was having this out-of-body experience, and then the snake saw us, got scared, and swam, and all of the spikes collapsed onto its body and became smooth. And then I realized snake had been living in the stagnant water for a while and developed algae that was growing off of it. So when it was sitting still, all the algae would settle out. And so if you look straight down on it, it's a water snake that has algae growing on it. And so it does look like a snake with spikes. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a water snake. It was some sort of helicops.
Yeah.
But there's always an answer like
Amazing,
that, where they're not wrong. So when they tell you something like there's an anaconda with horns and multiple people have seen it, you make an expedition there. You know, like if somebody said there's giant ground sloths in this one valley, I wouldn't be like, they're extinct. I'd be like, where? You know, you start to listen. I mean, after the tribe walked out of the forest, you could tell me, I mean, that day, if a Tyrannosaurus Rex walked out behind them, I would have been like, makes sense.